Gives us another perspective of risk and risk evaluation. Jason Ralph is a casualty underwriting specialist with Zurich Commercial Insurance North America, based in Toronto, and spent the last 10 years working on both domestic and international risks, focusing on mining, power generation, petrochemical, and oil and gas. So, wow. Assessing liability, that's all I can say.
So before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank the planning committee, our sponsors, and anyone else who's involved with putting this together. It's good to see everybody with a common goal in the same room trying to work towards, especially from the insurance side. We'd like to see this type of thing happening, so thank you for putting it together. I also want to thank Enbridge, who suggested Zurich as a representative of the insurance industry. And while I do represent the industry, most of the comments I make will certainly be from Zurich's perspective. So I was asked to come here today to talk to you about the insurer's view of risk, and I know that we're talking about transportation of crude. Before I can really get into specifics about that, I need to spend some time on some of the basic principles of insurance. So primarily, how we differentiate something like risk from a hazard. So quick look at the agenda. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of the guiding principles of insurance. We'll breeze through risk classification and the 3 factors of risk, and I'll give a really high-level view of transportation of crude and the 4 modes of transportation, and then we'll wrap up with a quick review of risk management. So in the insurance industry, there's really 2 guiding principles at the center of everything we do. The first is the premium of the many pay the losses of the few. So put simply, this is we need written premiums that will cover expected losses and the loss costs that are associated with those losses. And that's really to help maintain the health of the portfolio in the long term. So we'll add loadings for things such as profit and wages and return on equity, but ultimately the pure premium, and that's the part of the premium that's associated with loss and loss costs, needs to be adequate. And if it isn't, that's when your rates go up. So this approach applies to the entirety of our portfolio, but it will also apply to individual lines of business like automobile, property, liability, and will also apply to individual industry segments. And that's especially true for specialty segments like the energy sector, where one subpar risk within a portfolio can cause a significant effect, like a ripple effect in pricing or terms and conditions once a loss occurs. So while we do analyze each risk on its individual merits, one loss can be a precursor to a developing trend, so we really look at those closely. The second principle is the premium must be commensurate with the risk, so it's relatively self-explanatory. Premiums have to be risk adequate. So the difficulty here is that no 2 risks are created equal. So what we do to counter that is we create risk groups that seek to find some commonality among different risks. And that allows us to collect quantitative and qualitative data, and that aids in the development of underwriting guidelines, class rates, and ultimately developing the premiums. So using the past exposure and loss data, our actuaries can, they can apply principles like the theory of probability and the law of large numbers, and that allows them to develop a current outlook for individual classes or individual risks. So in theory, that should develop premiums or rates that are adequate. It's not always the case, but it's really what the primary goal is. So when it comes to transportation of crude, the issue is that on an individual basis, insurer to insurer, and we'll buy big data. We go out and we try to get big data. I know big data is that term that everybody hears these days. But individually, the cumulative data available really isn't sufficient for us to develop adequate rates. So because of that, the segment is really at risk to large changes within, in the way that we approach and price these exposures. So as opposed to something like the manufacturing sector, where there's a lot of data, it's abundant, and it's really reliable. So irrespective of that, it all circles back to one thing, and that is that each risk is unique, and they need to be approached in that manner. So what is risk is really the big question. So before I talk about how we define the term risk, I want to just spend a moment to talk about the 2 categories of risk. So we classify them into 2 categories, the first being speculative risk. So that exists when there's a potential for a loss or a chance of gain. So there's a degree of certainty about the outcome, but because you can advance your position, it's not insurable. So gambling, or whether a company will make money or lose money, that's not something that insurance will cover. So on the pure risk side, that entails the potential for loss but no chance of profit. And because we're certain that we can't advance our position, that is insurable, and it really formulates the foundation for which insurance is found. So the classification of risk is all well and good, but like I said when I started, what's the term risk actually mean? So to us, well, let me start with something else. So we're exposed to risk every day. So when you cross the street, you risk your life. When you drive your car, you risk being held responsible for injury or damage to someone else. And similarly with Crude, we risk being responsible for injury or damage to third parties. So the word risk is used in multiple ways, and that creates some confusion. And risk really boils down to three distinct features. Uncertainty, the varying levels of risk, which Dr. Weinreich already touched on, and causation of loss. So to most people, risk implies a degree of uncertainty about an outcome. So there's doubt about the future, and implies doubt about the future and that the outcome would leave us worse off than we are now. So this is opposed to the word chance, which is reserved for situations where there would be a gain. So I risk losing my job, or there's a chance I could get a promotion, or the Cavs risk getting swept, or there's a chance, a slim one, that they might come back. Sorry, it's a little too soon, I guess, for anyone from Cleveland. So the uncertainty tied to risk is based on a lack of knowledge or imperfect knowledge. So if we knew something was going to happen, we'd be proactive and we would try to take preventative measures. So if we knew a train would derail next month and spill crude into a lake, we would change the inputs to change the outcome. Now, if you could do that, though, if we could see the future, then there would be no such thing as risk. And that uncertainty about the future is the first key point to define risk. Now, Dr. Weinreich already touched base on this, and that is the varying levels of risk. So not all the risks are equally likely to occur. Some are more severe, and we measure it in two ways, which is frequency and severity. And these are important to insurers because collectively it affects the availability of coverage and the cost of coverage. So within the discussion that we're having here, events are infrequent, but they carry a high degree of severity. So therefore the cost of coverage is high, and the capacity available in the market is relatively adequate. Probably not as high as companies would like it to be, but probably good for the type of appetite that we have. So it is a delicate situation though, because the same insurers globally generally participate on these specialty programs, and if you have large losses, it can lead to a decrease in the overall support for these types of risks. So maybe that's a reduction in capacity, an increase in price, or a complete retraction from the industry segment by certain insurers. So the final factor is causation of loss. So there's really two aspects to consider when looking at causation of loss, and that is perils and hazards. So a peril is an event that will give rise to a loss. So a pipeline leak, train derailment. Within the scope of this discussion, which leans towards liability insurance, the peril, the trigger on a policy, the peril, is negligence of the insured and their employees. So we all have a duty of care to those around us, especially corporations, and if we fall short of that duty of care, then we can be found negligent. Now it's important to remember though that even if we do everything reasonable and prudent, we can still be found negligent. So the legal system is always looking for deep pockets to help make those who are injured or damaged whole, and it creates a significant gray area. Significant gray areas, legal precedent can change overnight. So even if we thought our underwriting was sound and your safety precautions or the safety precautions that were in place were proper, overnight that changes and it completely changes the outlook on our entire book of business, which is difficult for us to predict. So that being said, even if costs were levied against, say, a company for damage caused with environmental damage, not everything is covered. So fines and penalties, fines aren't covered, penalties aren't covered, government-directed cleanup we won't cover. That's not covered under conventional liabilities. There are some specialty products that can do that. And the issue there is that it'll create a large gap in terms of what's actually available to respond in the event of an incident. I know that there's a lot of other things in place now at the federal level that provide some support, but if you were to take out, say, $1 billion in insurance capacity for a claim, that's a lot of money to have to underpin with like taxpayers' pockets, right? So one additional factor to consider is they have absolute liability, really having strict liability, although I think most people in the room might be familiar with this, and that's as soon as you have hazardous goods involved, there's a negligence automatically assigned to the carrier of the goods, because when the incident happened, it was in their care, custody, and control. So generally it's attributable to legislation or contractual agreements with state and provincial authorities. It's another key factor that we look at when we're looking at this segment of the market. The second thing contributing to causation of loss is a hazard. And this is the term that causes the most grief often. So it's a condition that may cause a peril to occur. So it may increase the probability or the severity of a peril being triggered, but it's not the cause of loss itself. And there's really two ways we subdivide this. So the first is physical hazards, which is the physical features of the risk. So the age of a pipeline, or the type of train car being used, or the type of storage tanks that you have on a vessel. They can be easily ascertained through risk inspection. Because of that, they can be readily identified, either completely eliminated or mitigated. So, for example, like proper pigging and then replacing damaged or corroded pipeline, replacing rail cars with upgraded versions that meet new standards. On the other side, and this is the difficult one, are moral hazards, which is attributable to the human element. So it relates to the attitude and the characters of an insured and their employees. So, for example, are they honest? Are they following their safety guidelines? Are their emergency response procedures as hardy as they say they are? And essentially, you won't find these out until something's already happened. So because they are difficult to identify and assess, they're basically impossible, nearly impossible to eliminate from the insurer side. So we have to make some assumptions, which is really a tricky process, trying to make assumptions about a company without knowing everything that's going on. So because of this, moral hazards are often responsible for large increases in the cost of a claim. Usually they're the key deciding factor. And because of that unknown and unforeseen element, it's not really picked up by conventional predictive analysis that an insurer is going to go undertake. So now that I've spent some time around what risk means to us, I'm going to make some comments on transportation of crude. So as I said a few times already, what we're talking about involves a high degree of severity. So incidents aren't frequent despite the fact that you would think, despite how much exposure is out there on a daily basis, you really think that there'd be a lot more claims, but the numbers are actually pretty low compared to other industry segments. So there's a lot of visibility in the media, and it gets amplified when you have water present. So environmental damage from crude is really one of the most expensive and punitive risks that we all face today. When I say we all, corporations, insurers, governments, taxpayers, we're all really in it together trying to find the right solutions for it. So just to give an example of a few things that we look at, there's a long list of things we look at when it comes to these exposures, but just a couple of examples. So we'll spend a lot of time looking at topographical data, looking for what we call environmental pathways. So those are easy to find with something like a vessel because they can only operate on water. Pipelines might cross a river, but they might not all be close to a river, so we have to look at topographical mapping to figure out where a pipeline that's seemingly onshore may have the possibility to, could possibly migrate to a stream or a river and cause more damage. Rails will be is relatively easy to assess because the railways are all set in stone pretty much, the lines. Trucking's a little bit more difficult because routes can change on a daily basis. So regardless of which one you're looking at, figuring out those pathways is really critical to us putting together loss scenarios and understanding the potential for losses. And additionally, we'll look at spill and emergency response protocols, which are as important, but potentially even more important than the physical risk. The best physical risk out there, is going to have a loss at some point. It was already said earlier that it's not a non-zero situation, right? So if you don't have the proper procedures in place, that's where the cost of a claim or the cost of an incident is really going to go up. So we look very closely, we work closely with our insureds to make sure that they have what would be considered best practices. So I'm going to try to skip through some stuff. I guess I'm coming close to my ending here. So I'm just going to skip through the rest of this and then go to this one here. So how do the different types of transportation stack up? I put this together myself. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, obviously, but just going to make a couple of key, quick points. We all know how much volume is shipped on a daily basis, and realistically, most claims resolve from physical hazards. So it's stuff that you can actually control. The companies and governments can exert control over. The issue that we have is people sticking to policies and procedures. That's where the biggest one. So, not obeying traffic laws when you're driving a truck, or errors in navigation. It's the things, and like I said earlier, it's the moral hazard that's associated with the risk, the things that we can't control, but the person in the moment has to make the right decision in order to prevent something from happening. So, keeping some of these aside, there's one that I want to make a specific comment on, and that as an underwriter personally, the one thing that I like to look at often when I'm looking at these, and I'm not going to say what I think is the safest option, that's certainly for everybody to make their own judgment on. So, for me, the one difference between them is with a pipeline, the crude is moving through the pipeline, but the other three have inertia involved, and Earlier, the reference was made to, you could have a leak or you could have a boom. And that's one distinguishable feature for us when we're looking at it. I mean, a pipeline, if it leaks, it's pressurized, but generally, unless it's close to water or if there's something that helps, maybe it's a flood event or rain, that type of thing, that will help it spread. Generally, it'll be kept close to within the right-of-way that the pipeline is built on. And with a truck or a train or a vessel, obviously, there's other factors to consider when there's a crash or the way that it would spread. So, I guess I'm down to, am I over now? Are we over? Last one said 1 minute, so 30 seconds? Okay. All right, I'm just going to key, I'll just skip ahead to my last slide then. So, I've heard, I don't really have the time frame I'm going to say here, but I'll just skip to this. So, I've heard it before, not here today, around the industry and from various people, and I just want to stress that insurance is not, we're not here to be a replacement for proper risk management and safe operation. I mean, we, at the corporate level, we do push our customers to be as safe as they can. It isn't just about premium for us, and we have a considerable amount of capacity and financial resources that are at risk. So risk transfer, like to an insurance company, is really only one of the tools that can be deployed, and ultimately it should be looked at as a way to alleviate that responsibility to be safe. So to that end, we really expect proactive risk management as opposed to reactive. Now, humans are reactive by nature as it is, but if you can properly plan like we're doing here today, then it should take the amount of the number of times you need to be reactive out of the process. So I think I'm probably going to get the music shortly. So I will just close with saying, just kind of echoing what we said earlier, which is we know that we can't eliminate 100% of these risks. Losses are going to happen, incidents are going to happen. And the most important thing is to have concerned parties, people like us in this room, coming together and trying to do our best to come up with some real scenarios, some real solutions to make sure when the next one happens that we can get ahead of it. So, thank you.